Okay, so I'm going to do a couple examples that relate to the relative frequency approximation of probability. This is in the PowerPoint from section 4.1. For the relative frequency approximation, the denominator is how many times it was repeated or how many people are in your sample. The numerator is how many times your event A has occurred. So it will be a fraction. So this will be how many of A's we have at that total. Okay, so let's look at a couple from the homework examples. Here's the first one. This one is talking about test results. So here's a summary of the people that had positive test results, and I add those up. It's 42. The number that had negative test results, which adds up to 39. And that also breaks down whether they use drugs or not. So the ones that use drugs, total is 47, and the ones that do not adds up to 34. If I add up these totals or these totals, I end up with 81. Okay, so now if we go to the question, and feel free to pause this whenever you need to. The question is, what is the probability of a false positive? A false positive is if the test comes out positive, but the person actually does not use drugs. So that'd be these two people right here that have a false positive. So it'd be 2 by numerator, that's how many ways my event occurs, divide by my total, which comes out to be 0.025. Okay, so there's that one. And then they ask, who would suffer from a false positive and why? Okay, I'm going to go straight to the answer here. The person tested would suffer because he or she would be suspected of using drugs because it's a positive test, when in fact they do not use drugs. So again, the test comes out to be positive, but they actually don't use drugs. Okay, so there's our first example. Let's go on to the next one here. Okay, this is talking about how many cell phones there are in a household. Okay, so I made up a little table here of the information. 205 said none, 281 said one, and so forth. So I just put the information down here. And I add them up, and it's 1,077 altogether. The question is, was it probably of 4 or more cell phones? So 4 or more cell phones would be this group right here. So it'd be 93 would be my numerator. My denominator would be the total, and that comes out to be 0.086 if you round that. The next question is it unlikely? Okay, unlikely means the probability is small. And what the book says, and what I mean by small, it means it's close to zero. A probability is close to zero is unlikely. So the book's rule is if it's less than or equal to 0.05, then it's unlikely. If you take a look at this, it is not less than 0.05, not less than or equal to, so it would not be unlikely. And they kind of explain it here. No, the probability is greater than 0.05, so it's not unlikely. Okay, so there's that one. Okay, so here's the last example demonstrating this. Again, another one from the homework, kind of like the other one, but this time we have to make up a table first. Actually, you don't have to, but I do. It says among 141 subjects with positive test results, so I just wrote that here, and feel free to pause this whenever you need to. There were 26 false positives. So that means they have a positive test, but they don't use drugs. So I put use drugs, don't use drugs, positive, negative here. Among 160 negative test results, there were 5 false negatives, which means the test comes out negative, but they actually use drugs. Okay, now how did we get these numbers? We have the 26. To find the 115, I took 141, which is a total, subtract 26 to get the 115. And the same thing here. To get the 155, they gave me 5, they gave me 160. So I would actually subtract those two to get 155. Finally, I added up the totals across, down, and also across, and both totals add up to 301. Okay, so the question is, how many subjects are in the study altogether? There's 301. How many do not use marijuana? So don't use marijuana would be right here. There's 181. And the question is, what is the probability that a randomly selected subject does not use marijuana? So it'd be 181 out of the total. And that rounds to 0.601. Okay, so that is the last example using the relative frequency approximation of probability.